So awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Don. And we're really excited to have you share your thoughts about using assessments with your teams. So tell us the story of why you decided to use assessments and what you noticed.
So thanks, Kirsten, for the opportunity to share this with you. Really, what happened was I've got a brand new team of I'm the chief technology officer here. I've got a brand new team of directors that work for me, and it was a newly formed team within a year. Plus, I started noticing some communication challenges, I guess, between the teams. So it was my assessment at the time that we needed to learn better ways to communicate with each other, and hence going to a strengths finder for Gallup and a DISC assessment.
Oh, okay. So give a sort of super brief example of some of the communication challenges where people like uh get, tell me like a snippet of what made you worried and go, we got to do this.
Yeah. So one of the new people I hired is a very direct communicator. She doesn't pull any punches, and she makes it very clear what she wants and does it sort of forcefully. The others, as some of the others on my team were very much not like that. So they felt as if they were being pushed around a little bit by this individual. And, I was getting back channel conversations between the direct person saying they didn't feel like the others were getting their message. And I was getting back channels from the others that they felt like they were getting pushed around and they weren't appreciative of that.
Right. So how did you roll out those assessments to your team? Like, what did you share with them about it?
So I told them that we have a weekly leadership team meeting. And in that meeting, I said, hey, I want to find better ways for our team to communicate. We've got some challenges right now. I want to find more effective ways for us to communicate such that we can work effectively together and make sure that we are, communicating in such a way that we can A, work together, and B, better serve the organization.
Awesome. So what happened when you guys took the assessments?
So we did the strength finder first, and it was interesting because we did the strength finder. Then I shared our results with everybody, asked them to read it prior to coming to the next meeting, and then we debriefed it. And it was interesting. We went around the table and said, "Okay, do you see this or not? Does this make sense or not?" So we sort of level set between each other, and for the most part, I think we did go through and say, "Hey, I really noticed this strength in you." And then at the end of the meeting, I said, okay, so how can we make these strengths work together such that, I can sort of backstop somebody else's not as strong an area, and they can do me too. So it was really an idea that, again, we as a group can get together and sort of complement each other to make sure that, we get the job done that we were supposed to.
Yeah, so I love the fact that you started with strengths, because a lot of times people think assessments are all about finding the weak areas, and to really be able to acknowledge each other's strengths, like, kind of opens up the conversation for working together better. And then how did you follow up on that, or did you have them take the disc right away in addition to that, or how did that work?
After that, yeah, we went straight to the disc, because then it was okay. We've acknowledged each other's strengths. We acknowledge where, we can help each other with our strengths to make sure that we're sort of rounding out the team. And then we went to disc. And for me, disc was really more about communication. And it was more about, learning that, how the D's can communicate with the I's, how the D's should perceive the way that I's are communicating, that sort of thing. So they could better understand what they were hearing and seeing in the others. So for example, my strong D, who's that forceful person that I talked about earlier, she was able to get a better understanding of why the I's and the C's weren't kind of on the same page that she was, and how to communicate with them such that they understood the message, and they understood that she wasn't trying to beat them down or anything like that. That's just how she communicates. And then the I's and the C's and the S's could say, okay, this is how she communicates. This is what I should expect. I should also know that she's not, intending, to attack me or anything like that. This is how she communicates and how I can receive that communication. So it's really kind of going in both directions. So how to communicate, but also how to receive communications.
Yeah, that I find that sort of disc analysis so helpful to have people really recognize there isn't one way to communicate. A lot of times people think their own way is the way, and anyone not doing that is being a mean person or being, in the case of a direct speaker with an indirect person, it's like, why are they being evasive? Right.
Right.
And and so they kind of use their own way of thinking to judge what the other person is doing. And once they get the sense of, oh, people represent this different range, and I'm actually dealing with someone at a different point of the range, then there's a lot more openness. So cool. What did you notice after you guys did the assessments together?
So I think really what it did, first of all, it did enhance communication. So that did help. And we keep coming back to it. But I think it also increased the trust on the team. I mean, to your point, Kirsten, I think that people were able to say, okay, you know what? I'm not trying to get beaten down, or I'm not ignoring your message, or I'm not, acknowledging the level of urgency that you have. It's more that, okay, this is how I communicate. And, there were trust issues at the beginning. And, there were some questions that kept coming back to, okay, explain to me again why this doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. And we finally got to a point where it's like, okay, I understand that people with technical expertise are doing what they need to do to support me, and then the people with the technical expertise can say, okay, I get why this is so important and why it has to be done. So I think it was helpful, and again, returning to it, not just doing it once, but then, kind of coaching through it and say, okay, how do we feel this went this week? I mean, where do you think we're at? So I think that was really helpful with the team.
Yeah, I think that was one of as you were sharing the story, that piece, that it wasn't a one-off, that you did the assessments, but then you continued to talk about it as people were working together over time. I think that's hugely important.
Great.
So what advice would you have? What did you learn from this? And what advice would you have for other leaders and managers when it comes to this sort of assessment?
So first of all, I mean, I sort of knew what was coming when I got in it. Obviously, this isn't the first time I've done this. But what I would suggest for people who are getting started out or starting to manage their first teams is really sort of do an assessment of how the team is communicating, just from a stand back and look at how the communication is working with the team members. But even in that point too, I think it's good to do the strengths finders so that we can identify strengths, we can identify where we can help each other to help the team achieve its goals. But also I think the communications piece is essential, because I think it really needs to be clarified, for people who are in different domains, how I can expect others to communicate and how I should communicate with others. And I think that really eases, not only the communications, but I think it also builds trust. So if I got into a situation where I saw this happening, I would definitely do the DISC profile. But I think the leadership assessment, through the Strengths Finder is good to do in any case, because I think it's good for self-awareness, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That part of it's about self-awareness and part of it's about other awareness. Absolutely. So any advice you would have for a manager or leader in this area?
Well, first of all, again, and we always start with hire the right people, because that's fundamentally what managers have to do in the beginning. But then once you get the right people at the table, observe how the communication is going, observe how teams are working together in order to achieve your goals. And, if you notice there's communication gaps or something like that, make sure you step in and handle it proactively. Don't wait for things to blow up, because if you do that, sometimes it's too late to repair anything that's already happened. And especially, if you've hired the right people, you've got the right people on the team, you can't let it explode like that, because, again, that has lasting consequences. You really want to get out in front of that.
Yeah, and I think a great way to do it is not to sort of do the individual back channel stuff, which is what was sort of happening organically, but take a kind of proactive whole team culture kind of approach that this assessment allows you to do. That's very cool. Well,
Agree.
thank you so much for sharing that story with us, Don. That's really helpful.
It's my pleasure, Kirsten.